Hi again. As you know, there were hundreds of automakers with now-defunct cars from the late 1800s right up to today. It's impossible to give an account of all of them, but here are a few more. Elkhart, Indiana was in its day a car manufacturing center with two companies turning out automobiles. I've already told you about the L car that was made from the early 1900s to 1933. But there was another strong L car contender. A chap named Martin Crowe also produced cars from about 1905. By 1917, the company operated under the name Crowe Elkhart Motor Company. They produced 30 cars a day. The company manufactured both 4- and 6-cylinder models. It was called the multi-powered car. More than 3,800 vehicles rolled out of their factory by 1917. But it doesn't take long for things to turn around in the automaking industry. By 1918, they declared bankruptcy, but continued to turn out cars for the 1921, 22, and 23 model years before declaring bankruptcy again and closing for good. Back in 1915, a family of wealthy merchants and farmers with little experience in automobile making started producing cars under a license from Crowe Elkhart. The brand name was Canadian Crowe. About 100 touring cars and 5 roadsters were built in 1916, but not many vehicles after that. Production ended in early 1918 when the company, you guessed it, went bankrupt. Black Motors started in business in 1906 selling low-priced automobiles. The Black had a 2-cylinder air-cooled engine turning out 10 horsepower. It was a chain-driven car with a double brake system. From 1909 to 1911, Black sold a rebadged Crowe Elkhart automobile called the Black Crowe. Baker Motor Vehicle Company was a maker of Brasser-era electric automobiles in Cleveland from 1899 to 1914. The first Baker vehicle was a 2-seater with a selling price of $850. One was sold to Thomas Edison as his first car. Edison also designed the nickel-iron batteries used in some Baker electrics. In 1906, Baker made 800 cars, making them the largest electric vehicle maker in the world at the time. In late 1910, the Baker Electric was quite luxurious and was priced at $2,800. The last Baker cars were made in 1916, but electric industrial trucks continued to be made for a few more years after that. Lots of electric car startups happened towards the end of the 1800s and the start of the 20th century. Riker was one of them. They built in small numbers until the company was absorbed by the Electric Vehicle Company in 1901. It should be noted that Riker electric carriages turned out the fastest mile time of 2 minutes and 13 seconds. That was probably the first auto race ever held on a U.S. racetrack. The Woods was an electric automobile company in business in Chicago between 1899 and 1918. From 1915 until they shut down, they produced cars with dual power engines, electric and internal combustion. Electric in the back, gas-powered in the front. There were so many startup electric car companies back in the early 1800s to about the 1930s. I'll go through these as quickly as possible to give you a few scant details to hopefully show you what these automakers were up to way back then. They were all pioneers in the electric car industry that we believe is the next wave in motoring. In time, it will spell the demise of the internal combustion engine. Owen Magnetic was another pioneer producing hybrid extended-range electric luxury cars manufactured between 1915 and 1922. Here's the details as quickly as I can tell it. The Owen Magnetic entered production in 1915 with an electric transmission coupled to a conventional 374 cubic inch 6-cylinder gasoline engine. It gets complicated from here. Instead of gears, the transmission assembly featured a generator and a magnetic assembly that replaced the flywheel, positioned opposite to an electric traction motor with its armature located within the magnetic field. There was no direct linkage between the engine and drive wheels, but instead, the electric motor provided propulsion, with the driver adjusting speed using a steering wheel mounted rheostat. That was complicated. It was early high-tech innovation, but the company did not survive. Electric cars had been produced in Europe for over 150 years. In the 1830s, Scotsman Robert Anderson developed an early electric-powered cart. Everyone knows that Studebaker started out as a wagon maker and progressed into making internal combustion engine automobiles. But did you know that Studebaker also produced electric cars as early as 1902? Well, this lasted 10 years. The last electric rolled out in 1912. Detroit Electric was made by the Anderson Electric Car Company of Detroit. It was perhaps the longest-lasting electric car company from 1907 to 1939. Over the years, the company built 13,000 electric cars. Like most of these early companies, the Andersons started out building carriages and wagons. The Detroit had a rechargeable lead-acid battery. The company advertised that their car could go 80 miles between battery recharging. Although at least one, Detroit Electric ran 211 miles on a single charge. Not bad. The top speed was only 20 miles an hour. I've read that Detroit Electric went bankrupt in 1929, but the company was purchased and was able to keep going on a special order basis. Apparently, the last Detroit Electric was shipped in February of 1939. The first Waverly Electric, built in 1898, was a two-person vehicle. In 1900, Waverly joined the American Bicycle Company headed by Albert Pope. Pope Manufacturing began production of electric automobiles in 1897. The 1904 Pope Waverly Chelsea was a runabout model. In 1899, the company had turned out over 500 vehicles. One of Pope Waverly's brands was a runabout of the Pope Motor Company of Indianapolis. It was a two-seater and sold for about $1,100. The car used 30 batteries. From 1908, they became independent again as the Waverly Company until production ended in 1914. These are but a few of the U.S. electric companies. In Canada, we also had our share of early electrics. In 1903, weakness in the bicycle market prompted Canada Cycle Company to acquire the assets of Canadian Motors Limited, a failed company. The company name was changed to the Canada Cycle and Motor Company of Toronto. You already know of CCM bikes and sports equipment. Well, this was the same company. Electric car production started that year in 1903. The chain-driven car could go about 40 miles on a single charge. In 1904, anticipating the growing market of automobiles, CCM established the Russell Motor Car Company in Toronto. Well, I won't go into that here, as the Russell Company was mentioned in a previous video. Another electric brand was the PEC, another Canadian company. It arrived in 1913. It left in 1913. It was out of business before the year was up. One of the reasons could have been the price. The Roadster sold for a whopping $4,000. Pretty steep in 1903. Let's look at a couple more Canadian vintage cars. When we think of Ottawa, we think of nattering politicians, high-tech companies, tourism, and of course it's the nation's capital. But automobile manufacturing? Never. Well, there was automobile manufacturing. In 1912, the Diamond Arrow Car Company of Ottawa produced 5 passenger touring cars built as the acme of perfection. Here's the story. The Ottawa Car Company already produced streetcars and railway carriages in the city. But 5 well-heeled businessmen got together and they figured, well, why not produce cars? The company's base of operations was just a 5-minute walk from Parliament Hill. The first car rolled out in August of 1910. The fledgling firm produced 2 models, a 5-passenger touring car and a 2-seater roadster. Both were luxury models with a selling price tag of about $3,000, a huge sum back in those days. Fords were selling for $775. The Burrisol was a series of one-off automobiles constructed in Montreal between 1899 and 1926. These vehicles ranged in size from runabouts to a 7-passenger tour, as well as 2 cars designed for the Duke Carriage Company in 1914. Like many, this company went out of business for lack of financial backing. Chatham was not only known for the Grey Dort, but also the Chatham Motor Car Company. It started in 1906. They built only one model, a right-hand drive 5-passenger tourer with a 20-horsepower water-cooled 4-cylinder engine. Like other cars, this one was overpriced compared to the competition at $2,500. The car earned local buyer loyalty, though, but suffered from financial difficulties. The factory was purchased by Detroit Anhut Motor Company in 1910. Anhut went out of business later that year. The Clinton automobile was manufactured between 1911 and 1912 in Clinton, Ontario. The Clinton Motor Company was a descendant of the Clinton Thresher Company that went out of business in 1908 when the factory burned down. The car was made as a large tourer, roadster, or combination car that could be converted from a passenger car to a light truck. No more than 8 cars were made, plus a few trucks. London Motors was a company formed by William Stansell, who previously was involved with the production of the Brock car in Amherstburg. The London 6 was an impressive vehicle featuring wooden disc wheels and a pointed windscreen. Production began in late 1921. In 1924, Stansell made visits to various firms and bankers looking for extra capital to expand his product line. But in his absence, the board of directors allowed control to be taken over by new investors, who shut the company down in 1925. Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed. I thank you for viewing, and we'll see you again, hopefully at the car shows and cruise nights later this year. Bye for now.